This vlog is going to be a bit of a look back at the past year, 2024, where I have done a lot of travel. I left New Zealand around the middle of March. I've been traveling right up until now, and I ended up visiting, I think it was something like 14 different countries. Some of them I visited twice, at least one I visited 3 times. And whether or not I have accomplished the purposes that I had for all of that travel, both for myself personally and also for Long White Cloud Qigong, my Qigong school. So every year I have a bit of a tradition where at the end of the year I write a review of the year for Long White Cloud Qigong. So not a critical review, I don't give it a star rating or anything like that, but where I look back at the major events and developments and I write them down. And I think I find it a useful process for myself to look at what has been done, because it's very easy when you're in the middle of everything and just focusing on the next thing to sort of lose the bigger picture. So I find that useful for myself. I think it's also really nice to share that with people who are connected with Long White Cloud Qigong, so they can also see everything that's been happening. And then within that review, I also look ahead at the next year and what the plans are specifically for Long White Cloud Qigong. So I'm going to do a little of that in this vlog as well. It's going to give me the opportunity to talk about some details that may be not so easy to just write into that review, give a little bit more information. So some people reading that year in review are probably going to want to watch this vlog as well to get a little bit more of my thinking behind some things. And also here I'll talk a little bit about myself personally too, not too much, but in broad brush strokes, how some of this affects me as well. So what were those 3 purposes? If you have been following the vlog for a while, and particularly watched some of the videos right from earlier in the year when I was just heading out, you might already know that I had 3 major purposes for my travel. So the first one was to connect or reconnect with Long White Cloud Qigong students and instructors all over the world. The second one was to look for venues for running retreats and trainings in the future, in-person trainings. And then the third one was I was looking for somewhere to base myself that would better facilitate my teaching of Qigong to people around the world. So how did I get on? The first one, making in-person connections. Yes, definitely, that one went really well. We managed to do several things. We taught a bunch of Qigong workshops in different countries. We also ran 2 retreats, Qigong walking retreats, one in the UK, one in the US. And I also had the opportunity to attend and present at a big Qigong conference in the US by the NQA, National Qigong Association there, where there were lots of people from, well, all over the US, some from other parts of the world too, from many different backgrounds relating to Qigong, but specifically quite a lot of Long White Cloud Qigong instructors were there. And then in addition to that, I also, from time to time as I was traveling, the opportunity came up to teach just quite spontaneous Qigong classes, maybe organize just a day or 2 in advance and meet just new people in different places that I was visiting. And so that was great too. Now, a lot of those connections were reconnections. So prior to the pandemic, I used to travel quite a lot teaching workshops and running some retreats in different parts of the world. But I was kind of got stuck in New Zealand for about 4 years with both the pandemic and a few things flowing out of that. And so I hadn't seen some of those people in quite a while, and it was really great to reconnect with old friends and familiar faces. And then there were also a lot of people who I have had a lot of contact with online, through online teaching over the last several years. And I was able to have a first in-person connection with them. And that was really nice too. I think there's a lot of value in those in-person contacts. So first one, well and truly achieved. Second one, looking for retreat venues or places for trainings and so on. This one's a mixed bag. In terms of the 2 retreats that we did run, they both went well. The one in the UK we did at a place called Gradbatch Mill, and the venue was really nice. The food was amazing. They did a really good job. I was surprised by how good the food was. And then the natural environment also around the place was really, really nice. The second retreat, the one in the US, that was a bit of an unusual situation in that there was a hurricane immediately before the retreat, and so things were still being cleaned up afterwards, and we weren't able to use the venue that we had planned on using, and so we ended up actually just doing it at someone's house. So Clayton, who is a long-time Long White Cloud Qigong instructor, and his wife Carla graciously opened their home for our retreat, and it actually worked really well. And I think Clayton and Carla quite liked us having it there, so that's possibly something we might do in the future again as well, if of course they're open to that. In terms of finding other venues though, it was challenging. Both myself and my assistant Tihana spent quite a bit of time at some points during the year looking for venues and finding the right balance of both facilities available, natural environment around the venue, the cost being a big factor, and availability. Was it just available at suitable dates was really, really challenging. We did actually think we might try to fit in a third retreat, but we just couldn't pull it off. Now, to be fair, that was at relatively short notice, several months in advance, but that's short notice for a retreat that we were trying to organize things. But yeah, we couldn't get it to happen. And yeah, so that's an ongoing thing. We don't have a short list of different venues that we think we can go back to at this stage. We need to do more work on that. And this is going to flow into some of my insights for this year and how it's shaping plans for 2025. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the last one, my third purpose, was to find somewhere to base myself for maybe not forever, but for the next several years, that would facilitate my teaching of Qigong to people around the world. Of course, traveling as well, but a good place to be based for the other parts of my work. I had a goal that I wanted to find and be settled on whatever this location was going to be by the end of the year, by now, basically. And I'm not really there yet. So I'm in Bali right now. And there's a lot of things I like about Bali, a lot of things that I think potentially can support my Qigong teaching quite well. But there's also things about how things work here that I'm not entirely comfortable with, or at least not yet. So that one's a work in progress as well. I've managed to be really quite productive for the time that I've been here. Now that I've come back, I've been here about 6 weeks and been pretty productive during that time. And so at this stage, I'm looking to be here for a while longer and, to have a good productive period of time working on some major projects for Long White Cloud Qigong, which I'll talk about soon. But beyond that, I'm not sure yet. So we'll see. All right, so this is probably a good time to talk about some of the insights that I've got from traveling this year. I'm not going to get into too many deep personal insights. These ones are going to be mainly about teaching Qigong and dynamics around that. So one of the things that was interesting was visiting people in so many different parts of the world was just how accessible Qigong was for them. And it is different in different parts of the world. There are pockets where there are now, there are options for people. Overall, awareness of Qigong has grown a lot. It's been gradually over quite a few years, but a lot particularly in the last few years. And so there's more people taking an interest, doing the Qigong practices for themselves, and there are more people teaching. And so there are some places where people have options of different classes they can go to, different teachers they can work with, which is great. On the other hand, there are, hang on, that was just an extremely noisy scooter going past. So some scooters going past are probably going to be fine, but that one I think would have drowned out me talking and made it, difficult for you to hear. All right, yeah, so but there are other places where, while there are some people starting to do Qigong, the people there still really feel like no one else really knows about it. And more importantly, they have a hard time finding classes that they would like to attend and finding that community around them to support them in their practice. When you combine this with some of the other things that I found, and I suspected this to be the case, this is why you learn things by actually going and experiencing and trying. With what I've found about traveling in general, and then also specifically, costs of venues and things like this, boy, things have got a lot more expensive, and this makes it more challenging for a lot of people to travel as well than it was in the past. And so for some people, if they don't have good options for Qigong in their local area, by all means, they're going to, both in terms of having the time available and the money available and all that sort of thing, they're going to be able to travel and maybe attend a retreat and all that sort of thing. Fantastic. And I think it's great to make those opportunities available for people. I think there's so much value in coming together, and particularly being in an immersive environment where all you focus on for a period of time is your Qigong practice, as well as the natural surroundings and good food, that sort of thing. I think so much value comes from that. But there's a lot of people that's just not going to be accessible for. And so these things combined has really reinforced to me the importance and value of teaching Qigong online. Now, I've done this for a long time. I started well before the pandemic, and now the format that I've done it in has evolved and changed over time, but I started well before the pandemic. And my initial motivation was very much, the inspiration for it came because I was contacted by people all around New Zealand and all around the world who were saying, hey, I can't find someone to teach me Qigong. Do you know anyone? And most of the time I didn't, And so I thought, hey, I'll create some resources and opportunity that they can just at least do something online. This then further developed into actually fleshing the syllabus out to become full instructor certification programs to empower people to become that teacher of Qigong in their community and start to spread it that way. And then during the pandemic, of course, then it became, even more important to have online options for people, because even people who had up until that point had in-person classes that they could attend, they couldn't do it with all the lockdowns, and so having the ability to connect online was so valuable. And even now, coming out of the pandemic, I had sort of in mind that not that I would stop teaching online, but that I would be able to reorient a lot of my teaching to in-person teaching, running retreats, and so on. But my aim is to really make Qigong accessible to whoever, is interested and can benefit from it. And I think, focusing too much on retreats and things like that simply isn't going to be accessible for everyone. And the online teaching is great for being able to make Qigong accessible at a price that people can afford, and also just geographically where they don't have to travel and so on. And so because of this, it's not that I'm not going to run retreats and things in the future. I certainly will. I think that is so valuable, but maybe not to the same extent as I had in mind. If anything, I'm going to put more focus onto the online training and create some more opportunities around that for people to learn Qigong. So coming out of that, there are 3 major projects that we're looking at for Long White Cloud Qigong coming up in 2025, in addition to still running the other courses that we have been running up until now. So the first of those is a revamp of our social media. Over the last several years, some of you might be aware, my nephew Josh has been in charge of Long White Cloud Qigong's social media, particularly on Instagram, not so much on the other platforms. We haven't done much on the other platforms for the last little while. And he, I think, has done a really good job, especially considering what I've given him to work with. Essentially, I haven't been producing any content specifically for social media. Josh has just had to work from various articles and vlogs and things that I've made and come up with posts that, you know, are interesting for people. And yeah, I think he's done really well at that. But Josh is now taking a new direction with his business and focusing specifically on photography and videography in New Zealand. So if you need a videographer or a photographer, there's actually a link to his new business in that article I mentioned with the year in review. You can find that in there. But yeah, so we need to take a new direction one way or another, and we're going to be taking our social media more in-house. So Tihana is going to be taking over the management of our social media, and we're going to take another little break here. Another noisy vehicle. And I am going to start putting more focus onto creating some content specifically for our social media, and we are going to put it across more platforms. So not just Instagram, we will be putting it across Facebook, we'll be using YouTube a bit more, we're probably even going to use TikTok as well. And yeah, and so this is because social media, I mean, it has its pros and cons, its good side and its bad side, like so many things in life, but it can be really positive for people, particularly if there's good positive things on it. Social media can have a valuable role in giving inspiration or motivation. It can also, it's really good for putting out information, education, and then also for creating interaction, building community essentially. And we haven't really been achieving that with our social media through Long White Cloud Qigong, and our aim is to start to do that this year. So you're going to see some big changes in our social media coming up, and it's a lot of work actually putting it all together, but yeah, that's what we're doing. The second major project is the Qigong healing course. I know a lot of people have been waiting for this one for quite some time. And, you know, there have been a number of other things that I've needed to accomplish. But, I want to make this available to people. It's so valuable. And it's a huge amount of work. I've talked about this in other vlogs. Each of these courses take a huge amount of planning, and, you know, they're a major, major project in themselves. But I'm going to be focusing on that as well. There's a couple of parts to that. One part of that training is going to be focused on Qigong for self-healing, which is great for individuals to understand how to use the practices on themselves in that way, but also for those who want to teach with that specific focus, whether as a standalone focus or possibly combined with other Qigong practices, bring more of that element in. And that is going to be all delivered online, again, to make it widely accessible to people wherever they happen to be. And then the second part of that is going to be training for people who are wanting to use this type of skill and work on other people. That part's going to be done in person, but we need to get the online part done first, because that creates a foundation, developing of awareness and skill that can then be applied in that way. So that's the second major project. And then the third one, and this is something that I have wanted to do. You know, I've had ideas about doing this for at least 8 years, and for one reason or another, there's always been different things that have made it not really practical for me to do that because of other work I've had to do. But I think it's time to just get on and do it. And that is to run regular, weekly, live streaming Qigong classes. So maybe quite similar to the type of class you might have in person in your community, where you turn up, you meet with familiar faces, you have a teacher leading, guiding you through a variety of different Qigong practices. And yeah, that can be, well, really nice, really valuable. And I think this can play a valuable role for people in a variety of ways. So As you know, a lot of what we do currently at Long White Cloud Qigong is we offer really in-depth, comprehensive courses that train people. Again, a lot of people just do it for themselves because they want this really deep foundation for themselves. But it's training people so that they can teach as well if they wish. And they're a big commitment, both in terms of time and energy and focus and cost. It's a big commitment. And for a variety of reasons, that might not be quite what someone's looking for or is suitable for them. For some people, it suits them much better to just have a regular class, to enjoy the practice, and to soak in the information, the understanding, little by little over time. And so that's what you can get from regular classes. And so we're planning to start offering those in 2025. Now, with these 3 major projects that we're working on all at once, things are going to come step by step. So you'll see a change in our social media straight away. You'll see, well, I'll make announcements when the Qigong healing course is available. There's a lot of work to be done on that, so that'll be some time away. And with the live streaming Qigong classes, the regular classes, they're not going to be regular to begin with. They're going to be irregular. We're going to test out a few things. We're going to run some different free classes on different platforms and things to see how they work over the next several months. And we'd love to have you join us in those, see how you like the classes. But the aim is that coming out of that, a bit further into the year, we'd be looking at making these classes regular, weekly, possibly more than once a week, and on a subscription basis. Okay, and then the last part of this, how does this tie in with my personal sort of situation, my personal plans? Coming back to Bali again, I did kind of have in mind that, as well as, again, still teaching online, that I might put a fair amount of my focus onto some in-person teaching, both in terms of running retreats here. There's lots of venues here. It is quite far from lots of parts of the world, so not so easy for people to get to necessarily, but great once you're here. And then also just in terms of some regular classes, not that, well, there's so many people who come and go through here. It's not that I would be able to build a class where there's, the same people every week. But a great place to run a class where there's lots of different people every week, and maybe a place where they can discover Qigong for the first time. I think that could work really well in Bali. But looking at these 3 major projects, which I feel are really important, I don't think I can do both right now. So I'm actually putting that in-person teaching aside so I can focus on these online projects. And it's going to be a busy, busy time for a good few months to try to get on top of these and start to offer those. And so I'm not interacting with being in Bali in quite the way I had imagined. And maybe that's a good thing, because it gives me more time to get settled in, to experience things here and see if I'm really comfortable here before making a much bigger commitment. Because in order to do in-person teaching here, I'd have to do a whole lot of stuff with working visas and residency and all that sort of thing, and it is quite a big commitment. So before that, my situation here is going to be much more flexible. It's going to be focused on the online work, and that'll give me time to see how well it really fits, and whether Bali is a relatively short-term base for me, a place where I can be productive, get some work done, or whether it might become a longer base over time. So, as I said earlier, that one's a work in progress. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the vlog. I guess if you made it all the way to here, you were really interested in what's happened over the past year and what's coming up. And, I do appreciate I've probably been a bit rambly and added detail that maybe not everyone's interested in, but I do try to be very transparent with people in the Long White Cloud Qigong community, and let them know what's coming up, what they can expect and why. And so that's why I make this kind of vlog. That's why I write the posts that I wrote. And I think for at least some people, it's It's really useful. Lets them know what to expect coming up. All right. Again, thank you, those of you who made it all the way to the end. I look forward to seeing you on another vlog soon.